The pie crust was already in the oven. Butter and flour and a pinch of salt, the same recipe I'd been making since I was 19 years old. When my phone buzzed against the kitchen tile, I had my hands in a bowl of sliced apples, turning them in cinnamon and sugar, the whole kitchen smelling like something that should have people in it. My daughter-in-law had mentioned twice over the summer that she wanted to learn my grandmother's pie recipe, the one written in pencil on a note card that had gone soft with age. I had finally copied it out in pen, tucked it into a card, and planned to hand it over at Thanksgiving. I'd even ordered special vanilla from a small farm in Vermont that my grandmother had always insisted on. The text was from my son. "Mom, really sorry, but we're not going to make it up this year. Chelsea's got a big collab launching over the holiday weekend, and we can't really leave Austin right now. Let's do a FaceTime Thursday. Love you." I stood there reading it with apple juice on my fingers. He was 36 years old. I kept forgetting that somehow. He still felt in certain unguarded moments like the boy who used to fall asleep on the couch at Thanksgiving with his socks half off and the football game still murmuring in the background. I set the phone down and finished the pie. That week, I mailed them a box anyway. The pie wrapped in foil inside a tin. The recipe card finally in pen. A bag of the Vermont vanilla. A photo I had framed. The three of us at Christmas 3 years ago, before things got complicated, before the requests started arriving without the asking attached. I wrote a short note and tucked it inside. I didn't mention the canceled plans. There wasn't anything to say that would help. The certified letter came on a Monday, 8 days later. I was bringing in the mail and nearly missed it under a seed catalog and a utility bill. The return address was a credit union in the Austin area from the zip code. I had no account there. I had never applied for anything there. I assumed it was a clerical error, someone in a database transposing digits, the kind of small administrative chaos that resolves itself with one phone call. I was still in my coat when I opened it at the kitchen table. The first page was a loan agreement, personal installment loan. Purpose listed, home improvement. Borrower, my son. Cosigner, me. My name was spelled correctly. My social security number was there, all 9 digits. My address, my phone number. I turned to the signature page. My signature was there in the cosigner line. Digital, from DocuSign. Time-stamped 11 days earlier, at 2:17 in the afternoon. I had been at my neighbor Elaine's that afternoon, helping her repot her indoor herbs for winter. I had not been near a computer or a phone link for any loan application. The signature looked like mine. Same general shape, the looping N, the downward slant of the last letter. But the angle was a few degrees off. I had been signing my name for 63 years. I knew what it looked like. I sat with the papers for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window, a cardinal landed on the bare branch of the maple tree and sat there looking at nothing in particular. I watched it until it flew away. Then I got up, refilled my coffee, and sat back down to read every page. The loan had been approved but not yet fully funded, pending final verification, which was the purpose of this letter. They needed me, the cosigner, to confirm my identity via phone call or in-person visit within 10 business days. I had 10 business days. I intended to use them carefully. I didn't call my son first. My hand went to the phone twice. Both times I set it back down, because I needed to understand exactly what I was looking at before I decided what to say. And something in the back of my mind, quiet and cold and steady, already suspected that whatever he said would be designed to make me feel like I was the one who had misunderstood. I called the credit union that afternoon, the fraud department. The woman who answered was professional and careful, asking me to describe the device and location I would have used to sign. When I told her I had not signed, not from any device, not from any location, she went quiet for a moment and then said she was going to flag the account for review and transfer me to her supervisor. I spent 45 minutes on the phone. By the end, the loan disbursement was on hold pending investigation. That evening, I logged into annualcreditreport.com, something I hadn't done in over 2 years. What I found made me sit back in my chair and stay there. 3 hard inquiries in the past 9 months. The credit unions was one of them. The other 2 were from lenders I didn't recognize. one from a bank in Colorado, one from an online auto financing company. Neither had resulted in an open account, but both had run my credit without my knowledge. Someone had tried 3 times. This was the one that landed. I got out a yellow legal pad and started writing things down in the order I planned to do them. The next morning, I filed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus: Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. Each call took about 20 minutes. The representatives were kind, efficient, and asked the same questions in the same careful order. By noon, my credit file was locked. My son texted at 2:14 that afternoon. "Hey Mom, did you get anything from Lone Star Credit Union?" Chelsea mentioned she needed a cosigner for our Kitchen Reno loan and set it up through DocuSign. "Should be all done on your end. Let me know if you have questions." I read it 4 times. Should be all done on your end. As though I had agreed to this. As though this had been discussed. As though my signature was a formality rather than a legal commitment that would follow me for the life of the loan. I typed, "I didn't sign anything." He replied within 3 minutes. "It's all digital now, Mom. Super easy. You probably don't even remember doing it. It goes really fast." I stared at the screen until the words blurred slightly, then set the phone face down on the table. I went back to my yellow legal pad. It wasn't until I was writing down the name of my attorney, an old friend from my hospital days who had shifted into estate law 20 years ago, that I let myself think about how long this had been building. Not the fraud specifically. The assumption underneath it. The slow, unspoken belief that my resources were available without the inconvenience of asking. After my son's tech startup folded 4 years ago, he had called me from a parking garage in downtown Austin, his voice low and tight. He had taken out a personal loan to float payroll for the last 2 months, hadn't told his wife, and the balloon payment was due in 6 weeks. He needed $9,000. He said it once, clearly, then went quiet. I wired it the next day. I didn't ask for a repayment date or put anything in writing. I should have done both. The following spring, my daughter-in-law called me, casual and bright, to ask if she could use the credit card I kept on file with their streaming account, just temporarily, while she waited for a brand partnership check to clear. It would only be a few days. 6 weeks later, I received a statement with $3,400 in charges, photography packages, a graphic subscription, 2 months of a software service. She paid it back in small installments over 4 months. After I finally sent a text asking about it directly, she called the text passive-aggressive. I had used the words "just checking in." 2 years before that, there was the wedding venue deposit. They had found a place they loved but needed $6,000 down within 48 hours or lose the date to another couple. My son called while I was still on shift at the hospital. He said they would pay me back from the wedding gift money. I wrote the check before I even got home. The gift money, when it came, went to furnishing their apartment. My son mentioned it once, vaguely, in the context of how expensive everything was now. I didn't bring it up again. Each time I had told myself what mothers tell themselves. That this is what love looks like in practice. That my husband would have done the same. That young people genuinely do have it harder now, and I knew how hard it was, and I had the means to help, and so I helped. I folded the receipts into a drawer and closed it. But somewhere between the parking garage phone call and the DocuSign letter sitting on my kitchen table, the asking had stopped. There was no longer a son's voice going careful and quiet before the request. There was just an assumption dressed up as a process. A legal document with my name already filled in. A text message saying it was probably done. I called my attorney the next morning. She listened without interrupting while I described everything: the credit union, the 3 inquiries, the digital signature, my son's text. When I finished, she asked me 2 questions. Had I received any financial benefit from the loan, and did I want to pursue this as identity theft or handle it civilly first? I said identity theft. She said she would have the fraud affidavit ready by Friday and recommended I also file reports with the FTC and my local police department. I wrote it all down. On Thursday, the day that was supposed to be Thanksgiving, I was sitting at my kitchen table working through the FTC's identity theft portal when Elaine's daughter sent me a video with a question mark. My daughter-in-law had posted a reel on Instagram. I don't follow her account. I had not looked at it in months. The reel was a tour of their kitchen renovation. New marble countertops that caught the light in long white streaks, a farmhouse sink, a 6-burner range that I recognized because my son had mentioned wanting it for 3 years. The island was enormous and beautiful and lit the way a kitchen is never actually lit unless someone is filming it. My daughter-in-law moved through the frame pointing at things, her voice warm and practiced. "This is where the magic happens," she said, running her palm along the counter. "I honestly tear up every time I walk in here. We worked so hard for this." The caption read, "Dream kitchens don't build themselves. They take patience, sacrifice, and a little faith that the right support will show up when you need it." Grateful doesn't cover it. She had tagged 14 home decor accounts. She had not tagged me. She had not mentioned me anywhere. I watched the reel once with the sound on. Then I closed the app and went back to the FTC report. The next morning, I drove to the police station and filed an identity theft report in person. The officer was thorough and unhurried and confirmed without any drama that using someone's social security number and forged signature to obtain a loan constituted identity theft and wire fraud under federal law regardless of the familial relationship between parties. He handed me a copy of the case number. I folded it carefully into my legal pad folder. My son called 3 times that day. I let all 3 go to voicemail. His third message was short. "Mom, I don't know what's going on, but the credit union put a hold on the disbursement and Chelsea's contractor is threatening to walk. Can you please just call them and confirm? It's just a formality." I did not call the credit union to confirm. The credit union was already in contact with my attorney. 2 days later, the credit union sent my daughter-in-law a formal notice. The cosigner's consent could not be verified, the loan was rescinded, and the approximately $14,000 already disbursed for initial contractor work was subject to recovery demand. They had 30 days to arrange repayment. I found out about the notice because my daughter-in-law went live on Instagram that afternoon. I wasn't watching. Elaine called me that evening, her voice somewhere between horrified and awed, because her daughter had been watching and screenshotted the whole sequence. My daughter-in-law had been doing a live Q&A in the new kitchen, showing off the counters and the range, answering comments about where she'd found the cabinet hardware. She was mid-sentence about backsplash grout when a car pulled up outside. The doorbell rang. She kept talking. It rang again. She apologized to her audience with a bright smile and went to answer it. The camera stayed on, pointed at the empty kitchen. The man at the door was a process server. She took the envelope. The live chat exploded. She looked at it. She said on camera, "What is this?" And then, quieter, something that sounded like her breath leaving her. She looked at the camera. She looked at the envelope. She said, "I have to go." The stream ended. I was told the clip circulated for several days. I didn't watch it. I had already seen everything I needed to see. What I did instead that evening was open the files my attorney had sent and read through the updated version of my estate documents. I had contacted her about revising my will 3 weeks earlier, the week the loan papers arrived. The previous will had left everything to my son. The house, the savings bonds my late husband had bought every year for 30 years, the IRA I had never once touched. It was a simple document. I had not thought much about it since signing it years ago. The new one directed my estate to 3 places. The first was the Veterans Support Organization my husband had volunteered with for the last decade of his life, the one that ran job placement programs for returned service members in our county. The second was our public library, specifically their summer reading fund, which was facing a cut in state support. The third was Elaine's community garden project, a half-acre plot she had been trying to incorporate as a nonprofit for 2 years so it could accept grants instead of running entirely on goodwill and her own retirement account. Inside the estate folder was also a sealed envelope. Inside it was a single notacard, intended for my son's eyes only, to be delivered in the event of my death. It said, "Ethan, I never stopped loving you. I also need you to know that love does not forge signatures. It does not assume consent. It does not borrow without asking and call the dead a gift. I hope you find your way to understanding the difference. I hope it's not too late when you do." I sealed it, initialed across the flap, and filed it with the rest. My son sent 11 texts over the following 2 weeks. Some were angry, some were confused. One, near the end, was apologetic in a way that felt almost real. I didn't think of it as doing something to you. I thought of it as paperwork. That one I sat with for a while. It told me more than the anger had. My daughter-in-law sent a long message through Instagram, which Elaine described to me as a lot of crying and a lot of pointing at the credit union. I did not respond to any of it. Not as punishment. I had done enough reading in those weeks to understand that silence isn't punishment. It's simply a door you're allowed to close. Every conversation I might have had, the gentle ones, the firm ones, the ones where I tried one more time to explain, I had already rehearsed them in my mind and watched them fail. I knew how they ended. I had been having some version of them for 4 years. On the Saturday after Thanksgiving, Elaine came over with a pot of white bean soup and a loaf of sourdough she'd made from her own starter, which she'd been keeping alive for 6 years and talked about with the same gentle pride most people reserve for children. We ate at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd read the loan documents, which felt right somehow, like the table was being reclaimed, and she didn't ask me questions or offer opinions unless I raised something first. She talked about her garden, about the new beds she wanted to put in come spring, about a documentary on soil microbiomes that had apparently upended her entire understanding of composting. I listened and ate the soup and felt something in my shoulders quietly let go. Before she left, she looked at me over the last heel of sourdough and said, "You look different." I asked her what she meant. "Less like you're waiting for something," she said. "More like you're just here." I thought about that for a long time after she went home. I had spent so many years waiting for the call that would tell me my son had stabilized, had figured it out, had stopped needing bailouts, and started building something that didn't lean on me. Waiting for the moment my daughter-in-law would call just to talk, with nothing attached to it. Waiting to feel like a mother rather than a mechanism. In all that waiting, I had made myself very small and very available and very easy to overlook. The anger had burned through faster than I expected. What replaced it was something more like clarity. The kind you get when you finally put on your reading glasses and realize you've been squinting at everything for months. I drove to the library the following Friday and sat down with the director, a quiet woman I'd known since she was a student volunteer shelving paperbacks in the mystery section. She had the careful hopefulness of someone who had learned not to expect too much from conversations like this one. I let her talk for a while, then I told her what I intended to do. She went quiet. Then she said, "We've never had a donation like this." I told her I wanted it to go specifically toward books for the youngest readers. The boards books and picture books, the ones that get handled until the spines crack and they need to be replaced. Because those were the ones that mattered most. Because a 4-year-old who falls in love with a book doesn't forget it. Because my husband and I had read to our son every single night until he was old enough to read on his own, and somewhere in that I had believed, genuinely believed, that it would be enough to make him careful with things that weren't his. I drove home along the river road, which takes longer but winds through the part of the county where the hills press close and the trees in late November look like gray lace against a white sky. I had the radio off, the heater hummed, the road was empty. I thought about my grandmother's recipe card, still sitting in its envelope somewhere in a box in Austin. I thought about the Vermont vanilla I had mailed with it. I thought about my daughter-in-law saying, twice over the summer, that she wanted to learn. I wondered if she had meant it, or if it was the kind of thing people say when they want to seem close, without doing the actual work of closeness. I decided it didn't matter anymore. Some questions don't need answers, they just need to be put down. I turned onto my street. My house was dark except for the porch light. Elaine's house next door had a lamp on in the front window, warm yellow light through the glass. I sat in the car for a minute before going inside, just looking at it. There's a certain point, I think, when you stop believing that love should require you to disappear. Not because you become hard, not because you stop caring, but because you've spent enough years watching what happens to a woman who makes herself endlessly soft and endlessly available. always absorbing, never quite solid enough to push back. And you've watched it in other women, and then you've watched it in yourself. And at some point, you understand that the most loving thing you can do for yourself and perhaps even for them is to stop. Not with a speech, not with a scene, just with a quiet and unambiguous no, and then a locked door, and then a night of actual sleep. I went inside, made a cup of chamomile tea, and sat at my kitchen table with the light on. The small centerpiece I'd made for Thanksgiving was still there. Dried orange slices, a few pine cones from the backyard, sprigs of rosemary that had gone a little dry, but still smelled exactly right when I brushed my fingers against them. Outside, the first real snow of the season had started to fall. Just a light one, not enough to stick, but enough to soften the edges of everything, to make the backyard look quiet and finished, the way things look when they've finally been given permission to rest. I wrapped both hands around the mug and sat there without thinking about very much at all. I didn't feel like I had won something. I didn't feel like I had lost something either. I felt, all the way through and without qualification, like exactly who I was. After a very long time of being something else for someone else's convenience, that turned out to be more than enough.